Hello there everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lydia's Crafty Corner with me, Lydia, in my little crafty corner. So today we're going to be creating this card which features some beautiful foiling, some pigment inks, and a different way to use your hot foil plates. So please stay tuned. So to start with, I'm going to be using the Decorative Flowers Spark Joy hot foil plate, and you can see that I've added it onto my Go Press and Foil, and I've just made sure that that's up to heat before I do my foiling. I'm going to be using the rose gold foil from Altenew, and I'm placing that down shiny side. Then I'm going to add on some navy cardstock and a couple of shims. Remember, only to use shims if you do actually need them. When I did this the first time around, I did add too many shims. So you can see that if you do add too many, you may get a little kind of cut in your foiling, and that's what has happened there. So I'm not going to worry too much, and I'm just going to keep going. But I have removed some of those shims as they weren't needed to get that great foiling effect. So again, I'm just going to do as I did before, heat the hot foil plate up, add on some foil, shiny side down, add on the cardstock you wish to foil, then a couple of shims if needed, and run through your die cutting machine. Again, I had a little bit of a cut in that one, so I added less shims to this one here. Again, just using the same technique with that rose gold foil to create 3 different foiled elements that I have now. So to keep everything in place while I'm colouring these in with the simple colouring stencils, I'm using the low tack mat from Altenew. This is a great mat to keep the stencils in place without having to use any tape to kind of colour things in. So because we are working on such a dark cardstock, dye inks are not going to work on this. So I'm going to be using the mixed media pigment inks from Altenew. So for the leaf here that we have, I am going to go with the frayed leaf, and I did end up adding some more greens into that later on. For the pinks that we have for these beautiful little flowers up top, I'm going in with some coral berry, and I'm also going to be using some of the frosty pink as well. So I find that the best kind of tools for these pigment inks to kind of squidge them through the stencils are some pieces of foam. So I just have these pieces of foam. You could definitely use some makeup sponges if you have those, and you can also use the blending brushes from Altenew. If you do that though, I would recommend that you have a separate set for your pigment inks than you do for your dye inks, because they don't particularly play that well together, so make sure that you have separate sets for each. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of colour in all of the little pieces that we have. I'm just going to be doing every layer on each of the images that we have one by one, and then moving on to the next part of the stencil for all 3 of the images. Hopefully that makes sense. And as you can see, I'm trying to add more of that lighter colour to the tips of the leaves and the petals, and then the darker colour to the base or the centre of the flowers. So the base of the leaf, the centre of the flowers. So I'm just squidging in that frosty pink, and then we're going to add in the coral berry to the center of the flowers for the flowers, and then for the leaf we have the frayed leaf, and then the forest glades for the base. Now I'm going to be using the same colors for all of these stencils that we have. So the stencils have various parts of the flower petals and also the different leaves. So I'm going to be using the same colors for the leaves and also the petals on each of those pieces on stencil number 1. Now I'm just going to keep going with all of the little elements that we have. Now the more ink that you add on top, the more vibrant your image will be. So if you want it to be really, really vibrant, what I would recommend is that you add a layer of ink, let that dry, and then go ahead and add in a second or even a third layer of ink, remembering to let them dry between each layer so you get the layers that build up. So with pigment inks, they don't dye the cardstock, they literally just kind of sit on top of each other on top of the surface of the ink. So that's how you're going to get a brighter look on this kind of dark cardstock that we have. Now, when we get to this point and we're kind of going over images that are not quite dry, because pigment ink does take a long time to dry, what I would recommend is after each layer that you put down is that you clean the back of your stencil. So this is going to mean that you're not going to add bits of ink in various places on your other images if you do have some left on your stencil. So just make sure that you have a piece of tissue by the side of you so you can wipe off all the excess off the back. It doesn't matter on the front because that's not going to transfer to the card underneath. So for this layer here, I have added in the little centerpieces to the flowers, and I've just used the warm sunshine. You can see here that I am cleaning off the stencil after each use on the back just with a normal piece of tissue just to get rid of that excess ink that we have there. So I have used the same greens for this part of the stencil on the left hand side, and then the same pinks for that singular petal that we have there. I'm just going to finish this off just using the same color of the pink, so the frosty pink, for the whole petal, and then also the coral berry just for the base of the petals there. And I have gone in with some of the evergreen just to add in that detail to the larger leaf. So once I have my images, I'm just going to move those over to the side to let them dry. I then have my background panel. Now this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 and it's navy cardstock. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hot foil plate that we used to hot foil before and I'm going to ink this up. So what I'm using is the antique gold ink from Altenew, and I'm just going to tap that lightly over the kind of raised impression that we have on the image, and then I'm going to place that into position onto that background piece. Now I do find it helpful to use these little tweezers that we have here. It can be a little bit tricky to kind of get these in the exact place as you want it to be, but I find that it is really fun to use these hot foil plates in a different way. So you don't necessarily need to foil them all the time. You can create a beautiful background like this with just a little bit of ink, and the hot foil plate does stamp really, really well, surprisingly. And I find that using it this way, where we can kind of move things around more easily, it's an easier way to get these kind of nestled in together than rather doing it with foiling, as it would take a whole lot longer than it does just to quickly stamp it with this beautiful ink that we have from Altenew. Now we do have a couple of golds, but I find that the antique gold works the best on dark cardstock. So if you want one that's going to go on dark cardstock, the antique gold would be the one that I would suggest and recommend that you go for. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that all of the kind of spaces are filled in, and then we have our background complete, which is very pretty and also very, very shiny. Now, my little images that we have used the coordinating stencil and also the pigment inks to color in are now dry, and what I'm going to do is I am going to cut out the images. I would recommend that you do leave these to dry by themselves, but you can speed up the process using your heat tool. So once I've cut out all of the images, I'm then going to add my background onto a white card base. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it was just made out of some classic Crest Solar White. And I'm just using the glue tape from Altenew to add that into place onto my card base. Once that's done, I can use the little images that we have beautifully foiled and coloured and kind of play around with how I want those to look on my card base. So I'm choosing to kind of create sort of like a wreath frame around the outside, and I'm just going to be using some of the Instant Dimension foam tape on the back of these to secure them down, but that's also going to add a little bit of dimension and lift to the images and add a little bit of interest as well. So once I have them in place, I can then remove any of the overhanging pieces using some scissors. I do find that it's best to kind of flip your work over and then cut from behind so you can see exactly where you need to cut from. It's going to create a kind of cleaner edge this way, and you could also use some larger scissors. That also makes it easier as well. So for my sentiment, I'm going to use the Build a Garden Rock Trumpet stamp set, and I just love this kind of sentiment that we have at the bottom, and it says make today count, and I love the kind of mix of fonts that we have with this. Also, in the Build a Garden set, we also have the addition of getting a die to cut this sentiment out, which I love because I love to have the kind of cut around sentiments but not really cut them out. So I am going to be heat setting this onto some navy cardstock. So I have added some of the anti-static powder down first, and then I'm going to ink this up using the embossing ink from Altenew. Once that's done, I'm going to use some of the rose gold embossing powder from Altenew to add over the top of that sticky ink, and it's just going to kind of grab that embossing powder while it gives you then a chance to heat set that into place. So when it has been heat setted, it's not going to move anywhere. So to do this, I kind of start on the back until I see the powders start to melt, and then I move to the front, and I find I get the best kind of embossing that way. I'm going to remove any of that anti-static powder just with my jumper, but you could have a designated kind of cloth for that as well. So I'm just going to take the coordinating die for this one, and I'm just going to run that through my mini blossom. As you can see, I am adding a little bit of tape just to keep that die in place while I run it through. And I am using the metal shim, as I find that this works really, really well with the little mini blossom that we have. I then wanted to add a little bit more gold because, you know, we haven't added enough already. So I'm using the metallic watercolors from Altenew, and I've just kind of activated those with a squidge of water, a little spritz of water, and then just added a little splatter to my card base just to add a little bit more interest. I'm then going to take the little sentiment that we've just die cut. I'm going to add a few little kind of spots of the Instant Dimension foam tape on the back, and then I can pop that into place where I want it on my card. So I'm just going to kind of overlap it on the back as well as those die cut flowers that we have. And here is the card complete. I really do hope that you like it and that you've enjoyed the video as well. If you do create a card that was inspired by this, it'd be great if you do share because we would love to see. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you again really, really soon. Bye-bye. Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.